Okay, so thank you for coming. And as people arrive, they can sit down. You've got a survey in front of you, and that's for information from our conversations at the last meeting. So wanted to get your feedback. And the last question is about identifying peak season for your sport. And I realize that some of these sports happen year round, but we're looking to identify the peak period. In other words, if we go down the path of prioritizing based on a peak season, what would that look like in terms of your peak? Doesn't mean that you wouldn't get field space during your non-peak months. It just means that you might not have priority during those months. So if you can fill out that survey, if for some reason you didn't have an opportunity to fill out the survey from the previous month, the first meeting, I have blank copies of those as well. I want to make sure that every group is represented in the feedback that we're getting. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get started on the PowerPoint, and put it up on the screen. Sorry. So I want to start by reviewing some of the meeting dates and topics so that we go through where we're at. We had a meeting on January 11th to determine whether Oceanside should reinstitute the Athletic Federation or develop a sports council, including membership requirements and its roles. Topic 2 would be to determine what should be the percentage of residents for a group to be considered a resident group. And as a reminder, the survey information was collected for that on the second meeting, which was March 18th. The topics for that meeting were to determine whether Oceanside should continue to have two allocation periods, or if the department should have 3 or 4 allocation periods. And then the second topic we discussed was to determine whether priority should be given to programs during their traditional season and define priority seasons. So the information for that survey is being collected today. And then the topics for today are to determine how the city of Oceanside should prioritize long-term users and new users, including how new facilities should be allocated. And the second topic is to determine if the user classifications that were developed by the standing committee should be the baseline for the new classification. In other words, is that our starting point? Our next meeting is on May 13th, and that'll be essentially to work on the user group classifications. I want to reiterate the important collaborative work that happened with the standing committee workshops during the fall. During those meetings, participants developed a vision statement, which is to enhance and strengthen the Oceanside community by consistently serving each community member with absolute fairness and transparency. And the groups that participated in the standing committee workshop also developed 3 values, and these are fairness, which includes increasing access and adding facilities and fields, community, and transparency. So these are the things that we want to make sure that we're thinking about as we work through these topics. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about prioritizing long-term users. So one of the key issues is how we're going to manage prioritization of existing user groups in each park. The current facility rental packet does not address this issue, but the practice has been to keep users at the same location from one season to the next. And we believe that this is important to ensure consistency for each organization. Users need to be able to register participants and know that they're going to have enough fields, courts, rooms, swimming pools, or whatever the venue might be to properly run their program. However, this is one of the central issues with respect to equity, because certain teams have been able to call specific parks home, and that could keep other groups from being able to develop in the same way. So we need to have a conversation about this and ask groups what it means to them to be able to know that the park that you call home from one season to the next will be your home in the next season. And also would like to hear from any organizations that feel like they're being shut out from a specific space because there is a long-term user that that is in the park that they want to use. I will also share that one of the organizations that I worked for previously, the way that we managed this was we had first rights of refusal for our long-term users, as long as the group was following the rules, paying their fees, and submitting their requests for a permit by the deadline. We gave them the field that they had traditionally had. These rights were during their season, so multiple organizations could have access to the same field or to a single park. And I would like to know how Oceanside and how our organizations feel about having a formal first right of refusal system, because that is almost what we're doing in practice. In that, you know, from one season to the next, Oceanside Little League knows that you're going to be at Ron Ortega Park, and so on and so forth. So, want to make sure that we offer that conversation. We want to continue to be committed to leaving our fields unpermitted on Sundays. So for the most part, our youth programs are Monday through Saturday, and we leave the most of our parks open for community unstructured use during Sundays. And we want to continue to give the community kind of this unstructured space. But there are organizations that are assigned to a particular park that maybe don't have need 100% of the time, Monday through Saturday, and that gives an opportunity for other fields or for other organizations to be allocated into those fields. One of the reasons that this could happen is because from one year to the next, you see fluctuations in your participation, right? So, so the question becomes, if my league, if my organization has 500 kids one year and participation drops to 400 the following year, and now I don't need as many leagues, or excuse me, as many fields for the teams that we have, what happens to those fields? And what if the following year my registration goes back up to 500 and I need those fields back? So that's something that I want you to think about as we start this conversation. The other question I want you to think about is what happens to the fields if they have to be closed. So say, for example, the condition of the field makes it unplayable, and we have to close it for a period of time. Does that mean that the organization that calls that field home is out of luck and you know, is displaced simply because their field is not available? How do we address that? I also, well, let's stop there, and if we could pull the PowerPoint down so people can be seen, and let's start the conversation there. So if anybody would like to speak, please make sure that you turn on your mic and that you identify yourself and which organization you represent, and we'll go from there. Anybody want to speak on this issue of long-term versus new users?
Matthew Berardini, Wolfpack Softball Club. I like the long-term user agreements, not just with my current organization. I used to be on the board of Girls Fast Pitch Softball. I know it leads to an investment by these clubs in long-term use, such as sheds and having an identity to the park and taking care of it. I think it fosters that mentality with the organizations. So I agree that first right of refusal should continue.
And if I could just clarify, it's not necessarily a long-term agreement. It's kind of the first right of refusal. So each organization still has to do their permitting, and that is part of that process. If you don't fill out your permit, then we potentially give the field to someone else.
Yeah, I like how it currently is, and I understand it is on a seasonal permit.
Hi, Glenn Hinton, Coastal Academy. I agree with what you're saying. First right of refusal, especially, Oceanside America or Valley. We share a field with them, and with all the rain that we've had, we have been the primary groups that have been getting the fields prepared and pumping off water and cleaning everything up. There isn't a contract with the city to, mow the lawn and do those types of things. But especially when the groups go in and do the lion's share of the work, I think absolutely we should get the first right of refusal.
I think Wayne, you wanted to say something?
I have a couple of things, Manny. I'm not sure how long I'll be in this meeting, but there was a couple of questions I bring on behalf of some of the organizations and sports teams. A few of them were never contacted, and some may even walk in the door here. Well, there's questions because we've always had somebody attend and sit in the audience from Save Our Streets and listen to some of the dialogue. And so there's a couple of questions here because one of the emails that we got, and keep in mind, I said this at the standing committee the other night, a lot of us weren't contacted and kept up to date on some of these things that were going on since after November 14th, when we had the meeting with Coastal Academy and the Parks and Rec Commission. I had a meeting with Council Member and Mayor Esther Sanchez on March 20th. And ever since then, we started getting emails, different people around. So it's kind of like what I've experienced in 15 years. When you push, then you get a response, depending on who they want to respond to. And so some of the groups were kind of surprised about tonight. So one of the things I want to propose and ask is, can this meeting tonight, can there be an extended meeting of this meeting before May 13th? So that some of the groups that couldn't make it on kind of last minute notice on getting an email, be here. Pop Warner was going to really try hard. I talked to Reese right before I got here. She got your apology, not having heard since January. And they were in all the workshops, very active and very vocal. She can't make it, but they were even going to try to get Coach Tapp, the president of the Pop Warner Group, to come in. 760, some of the groups that spoke on March 2nd in 2022 on how they were treated by Mark Olson and his staff over the years, condescending comments, get a permit, there's no permit. Just a lot of this stuff that came out in the ad hoc committee, as well as April 27th, when we found out that there was no joint use agreement, period. And Glenn knows we had that talk. He was at that meeting that night. The school district sent a representative. There was never a joint use agreement. So why on November 14th was Commissioner Kellen Sue allowed to say they were part of joint use and nobody intervened on that, including Councilmember Joyce? So when nobody reacted in 2022 after March and April, and here we are in 22, 23, 24, and nobody raised a finger to even work on that rental package or the classification guide. And then a year ago in April, when we had the first meeting in the library with the standing committee that became a standing committee from an ad hoc based on a report that was made in January of 2023 that included the update of the user classification guide, maybe a month or two before you even were hired in the city of Oceanside, based on March 2nd and April 27th. So when nobody reacted, you guys came forward to the first standing committee meeting at the library and did a PowerPoint presentation on the website and all of that. That wasn't a standing committee agenda. That was a presentation by staff, and they didn't sit down to discuss it, which was on the agenda. And so Commissioner Goldney and the standing commissioner, Wilson, had another meeting. They didn't show up again. So we didn't have your staff to show up to discuss the guide by which people were being allocated fields subjectively from the old guide from 2010 to now that had no terms in there, like nonprofit, like 70% threshold, like none of that. And so what was unfair was when the agenda got moved on November 14th at the Parks and Rec Commission, and you had over 100 people from Coastal Academy there, I was called to give my presentation. I did not facilitate this. I want everybody to know this. The only facilitation came from Arlene Hammerschmidt, where you had the values in the workshops. community, transparency. These were in the values that are now put on the classification guide. So when you're sending an email, should this classification guide serve as a baseline to all of us that worked so hard on the workshop, that suffered through a lot of subjective allocating of permits? You know, hell yes. Because what this is, and I can break this down if everybody has a copy of what I brought in the poster board that didn't change at all, because we videotaped our workshops in the library. Before November 14th at the commission was just a progress report. Commissioners weighed in who were never in one meeting with the standing committee or ad hoc or workshop, making motions about what, you know, accepting or not accepting. But I want to be clear to my fellow people that are sitting around the dais here, really clear. You can take it or leave it where it is. This is a compilation of information that I have gathered. We all have. Save Our Streets, Samoan Cultural Committee, because a lot of the groups were football, Warriors, Monarchs, Papua people, rugby, who were still going out for many years out to Tamarack when they live in the back gate area. And other people that weighed in. We worked together with the ad hoc committee, which became a standing committee. City Attorney, Assistant Attorney Barbara Hamilton. You can go out. Not two people out of the 3-member ad hoc, but one person can go out with Save Our Streets to interview and talk to people. Anyway, even you were part of this, Manny. Mark Olson was a part of this. And here's what it is. When you look on the guide and on the poster board that we brought here, when you see 70%, that's what you said at the library. You said you guys use what the county and other cities use, a 70% threshold, whether it's a priority for an Oceanside team or not. Mark Olson said that in the first ad hoc committee with my brother Wilson. We use 70%. Why? Because Thunder Rugby, who's here, was asking, they're about 70%. And Olson's response was condescending, sarcastic, yeah, right. More like 55%. They would not give information on 10 and under. The president's wife said, you know, I work for the school. We're not going to give that information. It was during COVID years. We're not going to do that. But we're 70%. They live in the back gate in the valley and all that. So we use 70% based on 2 pieces of information. In July, 2 days after our Samoan culture celebration, on the 3rd floor up here, attended by Mayor Sanchez, Attorney John Mullen, Arlene Hammerschmidt, myself, Lisa Russell, the chairman of the commission meeting, numerous people in that meeting. Jonathan Borrego said, the city manager said, with regard to Coastal Academy, they might not have to reimburse the 2 or 3 years that they were in under joint use in the fields and facilities. Why? Because they discovered that they were a nonprofit. Now, this was stated in July of 2022 to us in a meeting that we had. And so what I do, I put 501c3 nonprofit on here. Okay, and then when you have other groups or organizations like everybody's referring to, what's Encinitas, Carlsbad, the allocation of permits and all of how they allocate a permit to a field for softball, baseball, football, all of that. It was Commissioner Kelly Murphy from the Parks and Rec Commission after one of these meetings in the room. Wayne, can you follow me out to the car? So right from here, followed out here to her car. She opened the trunk and gave me 4 or 5 Carlsbad. I worked for Carlsbad 29, 30 years. As a Carlsbad employee. Here's our allocation for Parks and Rec. Here's San Marcos. Here's Vista. Here's San Diego. And so their thresholds wavered. Some were 51%, some were 60, some were 70. One was 90, you know, and I looked at that got incorporated in there. You know, I took bits and pieces from how people felt from the input and piecemealed it. So if 70% was a threshold on whether you're an Oceanside residential group, that became tier 1. 501c3, Little League, Pop Warner, you know, national level with an event there. That's why I put number 1. But if you're under 70% based on what you said, and Mark Olson, then you're a priority 2. That's tier 1 and tier 2. That was it. But then I also put little bits and pieces because the special events director for the city of Oceanside, Patrick Young, was in one of the workshops in the library. And he wrote, when we were filling it out and doing things with Arlene Hammerschmidt's exercises, he wrote adaptive PE, surfing, special ed, what category for them? I actually took that note and put that in. And if you look up there in one of the B's, I put a little quotation, little parentheses, that needs to be discussed. Where are we going to put our special ed kids?
I got a question.
Adaptive PE specialists. So that all of it was bits and pieces of what I got from everybody over a couple of years of issues that have been going on for over 10, 15 years. That's no secret. Nobody was going into the Junior South Beach Community Center from the Samoan community for 10 years, except one family here, family there, because Oceanside never handled those issues. I've been through 3 city managers at least. You know, I've been to a lot of people here. And so the findings on March 2nd in the library room was devastating. And we have a Commissioner Genevieve Wonder here, Lisa's here, Wilson, you had 3 of the ad hoc are here tonight. But for her to be here and listen to what was said on how people were treated to and talked down to by the Parks and Recreation Administration, that's the problem we had. And when you don't rectify the situation, and then you tell everybody, take a deep breath, let's go kumbaya and let's work on something and balancing it, when nobody sat down with the standing committee or the committee in the workshop. Well, what happened? We had to do it. And that's what happened. Now, you had only been here for months. So we were saying, hey, nice, but you weren't able to get your staff, Olson, because you were now the boss. But they wouldn't come and discuss it. And we brought up things, and some of these guys were in the meetings. You know, Junior Sales, the sign in front of the Junior South Beach Center wasn't even on the rental package. And he passed away in 2012. He still had the sign from Oceanside Beach Community Center from 2010. And I said, did anybody have any respect to even take a picture like you did at Melba Bishop? And so when we put this together, it was a compilation. It wasn't me going into a scientific lab and garage and go, I'm going to do this. I was putting it on there to get to the next level to where you and the people that we trust that work for Parks and Rec, like Jesse Montanez, we trust these people. We trust their actions, not their words, their actions in neighborhoods like Eastside, Ballarama, Crown Heights, John Landis, Libby Lake area, even Melba Bishop before he got taken out of there. We trust them. So staff come in, work with everybody and all the user groups, and let's talk like men and women. And that's where we were. We did meet, and I put it right out there. Don't know us through staff. Know us by contacting us, having a cup of coffee, having explained this, elaborate. I have no problem with that. Been volunteering on this stuff for about 40, 50 years. Never look for anything more than to just work on our children, community, and for everybody to be treated fairly. And that's why the ad hoc became an ad hoc committee. Deanna Lorson, city manager, Armijo, the police chief, and Mayor Sanchez came to the Samoan Cultural Ad Hoc Athletic Forum in July of 2021, I think it was. They came there and it was the same groups, same groups, Pop Warner, softball, all the groups were in there, and they listened to them. That was in July. And then so in November, the ad hoc committee was established. 2021, and their first meeting was March 2nd. And then you had April 27th. So Manny, on December 20th, a few months back, when you started having these meetings after November 14th, we right out here at City Hall, we represented and had our candlelight vigil, our 17th annual one, since Dan Besson was shot and killed by Samoan gang members on Arthur Street. Okay, and here we are 17 years later talking about the frustration and anger in our culture and our community. And all we're saying to people that get hired from outside at these managerial directorship levels, assimilate with the Oceanside culture. I'm not saying Samoan culture, the Oceanside. We're Black, white, Samoan, Hispanic, we're married to each other. Get to know who we are, come down, roll up your sleeve into these neighborhoods because we're dealing with your gangs. You guys did a nice mural at John Landis, the mural got tagged. You got 4 or 5 gangs tagging there. Even as we speak, got them on my cell phone, the pictures. Assimilate down there. If you're only going to do what Miss Eileen Turk did in the past, talk about Heritage Park and all these nice things, that's another thing. But don't deny, where we've been and what we do. We're looking for fairness and things that are equal and equitable under the sports flag when you do that. So when you come in and we don't solve the issue and we don't level the playing field to go forward, but then on one night when a motion was made and it went back into the hands, when I heard the word collaboration all over the place and a motion was made on a hostile, kind of like weird night where 100 people, Thunder Rugby was there and never got to speak. Pop Warner was there and never got to speak. 10 o'clock at night, the motion was made. And ever since then, what happened? And so it's not like we didn't show up or whatever, we are not, how transparent has things been up to now? You know, and so in our minds, that's why I met with the mayor. I'm doing this out of respect to meet with you face to face, because we're gonna do what we need to do to get this right in the city. And so in having another meeting like tonight, it gives us an opportunity to contact at least 5 more organizations that are not here tonight. We have at least 3 rugby groups besides Thunder Rugby. There's a couple other that couldn't make it tonight. You know, 760, these were groups, some of these groups were there speaking on March 2nd. I've been in meetings on the 3rd floor where mothers were crying for the Samoan Hawaiian community because the way they were treated in front of Borrego, the city manager. Nothing happens.
Can I just
So,
chime in and
I'm gonna
clarify?
finish
So,
now. I'm done here, but I just wanted to break this down with this. If you can, the baseline, that's gonna be us saying yes. That needs to be part of us moving forward, because this was not done on a subjective level like the classification guide was done before, Manny. So if you can consider that, that would be great. So more people can have access. I don't even know where it is on the, you know, for someone to fill that out on the classification guide. But I'd like to consider that. And I wanted to explain and break down. If anybody has any questions on how this was put together, let me know.
let me just clarify. So the way the format of these meetings is that we're going to talk about an issue. And then the idea is that you're going to go back to your organization, to your board, do whatever background discussion you need to have, and come back to the next meeting and give feedback on what we discussed today at the next meeting. So today I have blank surveys of information that we covered at the first meeting, and you've got information that we're collecting for today's meeting from the last meeting. So meeting number 2 is what we're collecting today. And the reason for that is we want feedback from everybody. Whether you're able to attend or not, we want the feedback that your organization represents, because at the end of the day, this document needs to be reflective of Oceanside. I don't disagree with a lot of what's in that document that the standing committee put together, because like you said, you've gone out and you've taken a look at what other organizations do, and you've put together the things that you think fit Oceanside the best. And that's fine. My issue is, and we talked about this when we first met, is I think this process needs to be public and everybody needs to be involved in that discussion. So when you say you had conversations with Postal, that's okay, but those conversations didn't happen at the standing committee meetings. They happened outside the context of the public forum. So I understand that some people did not get notices about these meetings, and I feel bad. I apologize. The way that I've been communicating with groups has not changed since the beginning of the standing committee meetings. I send an email to every organization that is in our database, and any organization that receives emails from us is receiving these emails. So nothing has changed. What changed in the last, for this particular meeting, is that I realized that there were some groups that I knew, for example, Pop Warner, and that hadn't come to the first 2 meetings. And so I texted Reese and I said, hey, are you coming to the next meeting? And that's when I found out that she had not been receiving the notices, because she's not the representative of Pop Warner that is on our distribution list. So it's not an issue of us wanting to deprive anybody of being here and giving their feedback. It's just an issue of how we normally communicate.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
I had a phone conversation with the mayor on a Saturday. Okay, that was before the Wednesday, which was March 20th, when I met with her in person. That was a Saturday that we were on the phone, and I told her why I wanted to meet. Okay, and on Monday morning, all of a sudden, I'm getting an email for a meeting that you had that night, the day it rained and there was some thunder. And you have, I heard a 37-minute meeting. And so all of a sudden, why am I getting an email on the same day of the meeting, 2 days after I talked to the mayor? Then when I meet with her on Wednesday, on March 20th, other people are getting emails suddenly, and then they're calling me up. Even some of the groups, I've already known that Olson and them used to call people to make sure that they're at a certain meeting, and other people just got a basic email. Why? Because you guys don't know who I know. We got to do permits, so we got to play that role, but they're still going to call to keep doing what we're doing to make sure that it's fair for everybody because everybody knows everybody. That's the Oceanside culture. We're not trying to be up than anybody, but the way people have been treated for years and years and years and years, before even the North River Road was named Melba Bishop. This goes back, we grew up here, we know this city. Now, the comments that I heard when we met with Glenn, and Glenn, we met you, right? Arlene, myself, and my brother. There was no violation of a Brown Act there. It was in response to the workshop where I said, any of you in here, get to know who we are. Because of the lack of trust, and cooperation with the staff here, don't listen and find out who I am by listening to what they're saying. Come and meet me. So have a cup of coffee. So we met at Melba Bishop sitting on an outside table on a Sunday afternoon. And a comment like, there was an opening to get a field at Mance Buchanan Park and Friday was open, even though all the other days wasn't, and trying to get a field, you couldn't. Why? It's locked in. It's locked in. And so in this guide here and me studying other cities and looking at this to get to the workshop, we were all going to collaborate because you're the ones that have to come in and say, where are we going to put Coastal Academy? Where are we going to put Little League and everybody? We got what everybody else said, but it doesn't have to be 70%. Shall it be 60%, 50%? But let's do it transparently together in the same room. And those people that have been marginalized and treated differently from other people over the years that live right across the street from a certain park in a neighborhood that's underserved or gang related, everybody's in a room together and then make your point. So if you're gonna, for example, have soccer for a year, but then some of your youth are gonna be involved with the recreational part of it for 3 months out of that year, well, then maybe those fees could be a little bit different for the youth in the recreational league fees or whatever, based on the big picture that you have with others. You have to look and break that up. Of course we know that, but we never got to that point, and it's hard for us to listen to somebody and follow that when they've only been here for a year with the pain, frustration, and anger that we've experienced for years and years. And it was before you, it preceded you. So what this was what everybody was, the information that was passed out by Chairperson Lisa Russell from the Parks and Rec Commission right now was the report that they made a year ago on January 2023 before you were hired. And what's the first information in there? The user classification guide because of March 2nd and April before you came. And in that meeting that night was Councilmember Rick Robinson, Deputy City Manager Rob O'Brien. There was Mark Olson was in that meeting. Eric Joyce, Councilmember Eric Joyce was in that meeting. We're all in that meeting, and they went that night from an ad hoc to a standing committee. Then they got officially ratified in March, and a year ago, April, this month, they tried to have that first meeting. And instead of going with the standing committee agenda, O'Brien and everybody walks in and goes, can we do a PowerPoint presentation on our website and all of that? So CJ Palmer's standing up there, with the website on a standing committee meeting that's charged with investigating bias and discrimination and equity issues in the city of Oceanside. No problem. We've moved past that and we're trying to be collaborative. So that night at the Parks and Rec Commission, multiple commissioners were talking about collaboration, but when it came down to the motion was made without the collaboration, city-led, and it's been in your hands ever since. And so where we are, when I look at your language in your email and you're saying that after your May 13th meeting, things will go back to the standing committee for their input, no, it needs to go back for collaboration. And that's where we are today. So we'd like an extension of maybe one more meeting. And when I go back to what I was saying about, Mr. Hinton, Glenn, he also met with Genevieve, who's a commissioner, by herself with the vice principal. And she stated on the current
I have a
guide that I
question.
came from 2010 to now, he
I have a
indicated
question.
they were not, Coastal Academy wasn't
really
on,
do
so
got a
no
question.
problem. No problem on
Question
that.
here.
That's
Yeah.
why we met with people, so.
I got a question.
Where is the, Manny, where is that form for the classification? Do you have it here or is it online? Did you talk about the baseline that people were asking about? You mentioned something in your email about using the classification guide as a baseline.
We haven't gotten to that yet.
Where did they answer that?
We haven't gotten to that yet.
Okay, that's why we don't want to get to May 13th because the next day is the Parks and Rec Commission meeting, the 14th of May. That's a bi-monthly meeting. So
Right.
that's what we really want to know. That's the reason I came. I can't, you know, cogitate too much on where you are now because I haven't been a part of anything, you know, because like I said, some of the groups, you know, but anybody have any? Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I got a question. I'm tired of his emails, of how many emails come out about these meetings that are coming about. He did mention that the emails are being sent out to whatever email is in their programs. So if, when we submit our permits, it's the Oceanside American president email, and that's the one that's getting it. No one else on my board is getting those emails. Does he now have the correct emails for the organizations you're representing that are not present today? Does Manny have the emails for the organizations that are not present now?
Reese from Pop Warner asked to be added, so she's been added. But Daniela, who's for Thunder? It's Veronica.
Oh,
Right. So Thunder Rugby, Veronica receives those emails.
okay.
I don't know about any
Well-
of the other groups.
Absolutely. But I think even better even if everybody's busy, if you could catch everybody up in another subsequent meeting between now and May 13th would be awesome, because then you'll have them here personally with their email. I can get that because I haven't been looking to be the guy to advocate for anybody. I'd like to pass the torch on, but I won't pass it on with the condition that the Parks and Rec Department is in. You know, we got gopher holes still on fields behind, Melba Bishop Center, you know, John Landis, you know, there's a lot of other issues that the standing committee is pushing your commission, you know, because you're hearing it. We got problems, and there's things that were promised me by multiple city managers. That's why I have no problem to go to the mayor or anybody else. You know, they know that I was promised on behalf of the community, not myself. You got Samoan softball players going out to Fallbrook because they are afraid to sprain their ankles, these girls, behind Melba Bishop, and they live there. You know, this is years and years. So the CIP projects and all of that, it's a compilation, but you're right. You know, we're going to get the proper contact and everything. But where we are right now, we can only really move forward if it's going to be true collaboration and transparency. And we feel like there's a segment that's left out, and maybe you can catch them up. We can bring everybody in and get them all caught up and then head in that direction of collaboration before it comes
happy.
back to the standing committee.
I'm happy to meet with anybody at any time who wants to meet with me, and I've made that offer before. And I want to be respectful of the time and commitment that people have here. So if you have feedback that is about what we're talking about today, please, that's what we want to hear, because you can speak to some of those groups that have not gotten those fields.
No,
And so the issue that we're talking about right now is about longevity and whether a team who has a field from one season to the next should have that formal longevity. Because what I would like is for the new document to speak to that. If we're going to give you longevity, if we're going to give you first right of refusals, then the document should say, we're giving you first right of refusals. It shouldn't be staff having to decide that. So from your perspective, how do you feel about longevity and first right of refusal?
But look, if you look at the report that preceded your existence in the city of Oceanside, it talks about fields, it talks about parks, you know, facilities. It talks about where our kids live. You know, I think there's a question of, you know, if you're in Little League, for example, and you live in a certain area, should that have priority over kids and teams that play outside of that, you know, out of that neighborhood? You know, and when you're telling us at a workshop that there's only 11 fields that you can allocate permits from out of 30 that you list on the website, you know, well, let's get some more fields acclimated, you know, for activities and practice and games with lighting or whatever. We've been talking about this for years and years with this city, man, even before Mark Olson even showed up. So that's the frustration that people like us have. We've been at this game a long time, you know, and so the issue is not really you. The issue is with the mayor and the city council and the city manager. I came here just to throw this up just a little bit to let you know that when I met with the mayor, it's similar to a lot of times when I talk to different people up here. Things start happening with staff that's more reactionary than it is pro-action. And the one day when it has pro-action involved with its vision, we can really move forward. But there has to be trust, and that's the biggest thing. You haven't reestablished the trust that was lost on the issue of the joint use and things that were found out on March 2nd when at least 13 or 14 teams showed up. Even Don Yasakochis with basketball that now has a contract with the city at Melba Bishop. He was there. And what was his issue? Is like, every time he thought he had a permit at Melba Bishop or the Junior South Beach Center, he's in there. Then all of a sudden he'll get a memo from CJ or Mr. Olson, hey, Oceanside Unified School District has to use the gym, so you have to be bumped. So what happened? What does he do? He calls me up because he knows all the coaches from Oceanside and El Camino. What do you mean basketball? And to find out later, it wasn't Oceanside Unified, it was Coastal. No problem. I don't begrudge
Okay,
Glenn
so
or
I'm hoping that
anything.
we can
But
just.
that's what happened. I
move
still have
on.
the emails. So
Wayne,
that's all we're saying is let's just get back to collaboration sometime in the
Well,
near future.
We've spent at
So have
least
that-
30 minutes on this topic.
let's,
I'm just hoping we could move forward.
is there anybody else who would like to speak to longevity?
Oh, I have just a thought that, in terms of, youth sports and having, people, children and kind of be a part of this one place and this kind of place they call home where they play, I think that's just great. And it sounds like that's what's been kind of going on, but that maybe it's been based on assumptions rather than something written down, which I think makes it a lot clearer if it's written down that the first right of refusal, and then everybody knows that that's what they have to expect. So I think it's better than just, this is how it's always been done, so we just continue, but if we write it down, it makes more sense.
I appreciate that. Does anybody have thoughts about, so my question is about permanent versus temporary. So I mentioned fluctuations in the number of teams that you have. So if you have first rights of refusal and you release fields because you have less teams, what happens when you have that growth? Do you now lose that additional field space? In other words, let's say I instead of Monday through Saturday, I just need Monday through Wednesday, and I'm able to give up Thursday, Friday and Saturday, and another group comes in. Does that group now have first rights of refusal?
Chris from Oceanside Valley Little League, just to kind of answer your question, like for our groups, we're year-round programs. So I mean, there really isn't ever a gap for us. I think even sometimes we've entertained Sundays because of the volume we have. And then specifically to Melba Bishop, we have 300 homes going in down there. So we're just anticipating that growth to happening. So, and then on the other end, as far as longevity is concerned, like for our leagues, next year will be our 75th anniversary with Oceanside Valley Little League, although Melba Bishop probably hasn't been there that long, but that's when they first chartered. So we've got a long history there. Our volunteers are 100% engaged with sweat equity on the fields. We pretty much entirely do, and this is common with all of our sister leagues, is we are 100% doing the physical labor on the infields because of the wear and tear and because we have to rehab them prior to games. And then the rain, of course, is a big thing for us. And it's getting worse as we progress, and that's a later topic we can discuss. But as far as longevity, I think we agree with that we would like to see that written down so that those things are defined, so that there isn't a question in the future.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, same. I agree with Chris over there as well. I mean, every year it can fluctuate, and the numbers can go up or down on any given season, and we can never predict any of it because our backyard is Camp Pendleton. So sometimes we get a big load of kids that move in with the Marines and sailors that get stationed at Camp Pendleton, and then they move out and the numbers just drop and fluctuate. So this season so far, I've had to make room for other organizations to come and use some of the fields that we are permitted in. And we're okay with helping out other organizations as well. Now, come the next season, we would like to still have the priority because we don't know the numbers, how it will affect us in the future.
So what I'm
If I
hearing
could
is
just add to that
yeah.
too. So there's another portion of that segment that on our fields, we have logistical things like getting equipment out, access to bases, the chalk, the maintenance equipment to get our, so there's that factor too, that when we do have those gaps, if there's other groups that want to come in because we have an open field and we want kids to play baseball no matter where they're from, that kind of complicates things because we kind of take ownership. Plus, we buy our own things there too. So there's that goes in there.
Okay, thank you. So if we went into a position where there's that formality, because we do want teams to release fields back to us, as Oceanside Little League has done, and you alluded, so that we can accommodate other groups. I think what would make sense is to identify to that group coming in that we are temporarily providing you space for this year. So there would be kind of this distinction about, is it, you know, a permanent allocation or is it a temporary allocation for this season that doesn't carry those first right of refusals? That's kind of what I'm hearing from you guys.
Correct.
Could there be a formalization of a 4 permit cycle to give these organizations time to know if they?
Is your mic on?
It won't go on now. There you go. My thought on that, I agree with everybody else. If there's unused fields, we want to have inclusion of other groups. But these organizations might not know what their census is year over year. Could there be a formalization of a 4 permit or 6 permit cycle to give them a year or two to know if it's a temporary reduction in enrollment versus a long term, and have that formalized where the original group keeps their first right of refusal in this period. So it allows other groups in knowing they're not having that first right of refusal in the next period.
Okay. Can we go back to the PowerPoint, please? We'll get to speaker comments in a second. Okay, so the second topic on this is about new facilities. So I want to address how we allocate those new fields, gyms, courts, et cetera. And this is going to be really important when we get to the point where we have a new joint use agreement with the school district, where we'll be able to permit fields at Jefferson, MLK Junior Middle School, Lincoln, Surfside, and South Oceanside. So the question is, who gets these fields? And I know playability has been an issue at some of these fields, but we are providing some funding to help get these fields reseeded, and the district is working to address some of those maintenance issues, so that we feel that those fields will be at the same level as our existing inventory. So the question is, what happens if the district decides to put synthetic turf in one of these fields? And all of a sudden, everybody wants to be on that field. So who gets it? Does the group that was there get first right of refusal? What happens if the joint use agreement ends and we no longer have those fields? Where does that team go? Do they go back to their original park? And I'd like to know what the group thinks of identifying. We talked about this already. I apologize. What about Park Site 1? Same issue. How are we going to allocate these fields? Should it be limited to the groups that are currently in the area? Should it be a lottery? Some organizations do a lottery when a new field comes on board. And who gets to participate in that lottery? You have to be a member of the athletic federation or sports council that we talked about in order to be a part of that lottery. So when I was in San Diego and we would build new parks, when the parks broke ground, immediately we'd start getting calls from organizations from all over the city, all over the county, wanting to put their foot in the door for when that field becomes available. So we didn't really have a system in place. And what I did in my district is we gave first priority to the groups that were using our older fields in that area when the new field came into the inventory, so that the ones that were using the less desirable ones got an opportunity to move into these nicer fields. That being said, I'd like to know how this group feels we should allocate our new amenities. And I know we have pickleball, so Parkside One has some pickleball courts coming. How do we allocate those? Because they're going to be brand new and they're going to be prettier than the older ones. So the new shiny toy, how do we treat that? So if we could take down the PowerPoint and open it up to the group.
How were new facilities allocated in the past? Like say in the 90s or something, when so many of these houses were built in Oceanside? What was the process back then? Might be a good.
I don't think there was a formal process. Do you have any idea? Yeah.
She wasn't even born. Well, so there was like Rancho del Oro, okay? So that's kind of in the neighborhood where I live. And that's a nice big park. And I think there's a little confusion because you have the YMCA on one part of it. And then you have the tennis courts. And I think a lot of people don't even realize that those tennis courts are city courts. Even the people living in Rancho del Oro claim that those are their courts. So it's kind of an interesting question. I mean, if in Ivy Ranch, all of that was built in like 2000 or something. So there has to have been some kind of a precedent set.
Yeah, there is nothing formal. I haven't found anything formal. I know that a lot of times there's an organization that lives behind the funding for a park, or pushes for the funding of a park, and so a lot of times they're the ones that end up being in that space. But this is an open question, and I want to go back to that vision statement and the issue of equity, because now we're expanding our inventory. So who gets, how do we make it an equitable process, and how do we deal with groups that maybe are not as positioned as others? And I know Parkside One, for example, has multi-purpose fields, so we have some baseball groups, but some of the next iterations of the parks at El Corazon have baseball and softball. So I can say that your sport is represented in something that down the line is going to have a new asset. So how would you like to be treated?
Glenn Hinton, Coastal Academy again. I mean, if we do the Athletic Federation, I mean, maybe the groups that are part of that, that's where kind of that offering would come up into. But I would definitely say it would be from existing groups that are established groups within the city would probably get the first offer to see if that's something they would want to use.
My field is built on a land field, so if you come up with 4 fields next to Ron Ortega Park, I mean, I would love to have first dibs on it, because we are constantly dealing with the fluctuation of the land field, making these fields not leveled. So that's how I feel about that.
No, absolutely. So we've got a new facility with 4 baseball and softball fields. So how do we decide, Chris, Matthew, Junior, you guys all have an interest in that. So what's the process? And you all have longevity. You've all been here. I mean, some longer than others, but you've all been here.
we've all played travel ball, or at least, where we have to combine both. And that would be something to sit down to say, hey, how can we make it work as the four organizations to say, hey, because now for Little League, we can actually combine the boundaries and make it one league instead of multiple. And then now it's under the same umbrella.
Well, could a lottery of the existing users be prioritized? Would that be a formal way they could allocate these fields by the long-term users? We get put into this closed lottery or whatever you want to call it. So the existing long-term users get first shot at it, and then new groups can come and take the old fields and deal with the nuances you're talking about. And then the process starts over in these long-term cycles. Because then the priority would go to the organizations that have been here long-term. Suggestion.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to speak to this? Make sure you turn on your mic when you're saying anything so people
Yeah,
at home.
Warren Williams, I was raised here, Thunder Rugby. And he's absolutely right. I think the new stuff should go to people that have been here, the longevity. And then the new guys get the hand-me-downs, just like we do in our sports clubs and teams, The freshmen get the crap and the seniors get the good stuff. I mean, that's just that's the way life is, so.
A further comment, I don't know if I heard you correctly, there was the sports board or going to be a formation of being part of an organization. I know we talked about it earlier. Would you need to be on that to be part of it, or would it just be groups? I don't know if his group's on this board that's either set up or will be set up.
So we're talking about that tonight. We're not going to decide that tonight. What I'm going to do is ask you at the next meeting what you think. So I'd like for this process to work as I've envisioned. You'll go back to your boards and discuss, how it, or maybe you just think about it if you're not discussing with your boards, but you'll come back and you'll give feedback and that's how we'll get to the point where we as staff have enough to provide the framework for this new document. So, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, go ahead and finish your thought because I have another question.
No, ask your question, please.
Okay, I'm uncertain about what the allocations per year means on this survey. Could you explain that?
Sure. So right now we allocate 2 times a year. So we do a spring allocation that covers January 1st to June 30th. And then we do an allocation that covers July 1st to December 31st. And so the question was, is that appropriate or not? Do we need to do more? The conversation that we had at the meeting where we discussed that seemed to, I got the sense that people were happy with the 2 allocations that we have. And I think that's pretty much indicative of the results that we've gotten in the survey. But we want to know how everybody feels.
Okay.
Now is the time to really think about how we're doing things and is it the best way to do things, or is there a better way? And that's kind of the intent. So with that being said, I'd like to open up. So that's pretty much it for this topic. And so I'd like to ask if anyone from the audience. And if you want that one, thank you. Yeah, please.
Am I on? I'm Diane Wolke. I'm a 22-year resident of Oceanside. I'm the board member for Safe Healthy Playing Fields, which is a national 501c3. We have activists and advocates up and down the state, across the country, and around the world. I want you to all be acutely aware, because I keep hearing plastic grass carpets coming up, that it is coming under regulation in California. The California Department of Toxic Substance Control is going to be opening public comments. They will have a workshop and public comments will open shortly thereafter. It was supposed to be the end of this month. I haven't heard from them the last couple of weeks when they last contacted me about additional chemicals of concern in these plastic carpets. PFAS is one of 15 classes of chemicals in plastic. There are over 16,000 chemicals used in plastic. Most of these are toxic and carcinogenic. They're known to leach from these fields. They're known to cause myriad health concerns. Anybody who heard me speak at Melba Bishop back whenever that meeting was, I rattled off all of the cancers and health concerns. The list has only grown from there. We just recently had the Center for Environmental Health, which is up in Berkeley, file a notice of intent to sue Lowe's and Home Depot for PFOS, which is one of the PFAS chemicals, which is a family of, depending on which source you quote, anywhere from 16,000 to over 6 million chemicals in this family. And it's because they found PFOS in the synthetic turf sold by these two distributors. They plan to sue under Proposition 65 because they have not provided notice to customers that they are selling these products that they swore that they were going to not sell carpets with PFAS in them. We also, if anybody was paying attention recently, we also had a study done here in San Diego last summer where young female soccer players were tested for, again, just PFOS on their hands before and after playing on plastic fields, as well as on natural grass. This hit the Washington Post. I believe it was around March 6th. It was also on the front page of the Union Tribune. This study is being expanded at Wayne State University in Detroit. Hopefully UCSF will take that up. I'm in contact with those folks. And PEER, which is an organization the acronym stands for Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility. These fields are not recyclable. They have incredibly short life expectancies. They only we know that they have failed anywhere from 4 to the outside 15 years. I have public records up the, that show that these plastic fields are not being maintained properly. They're not being tested for hardness, including our 2 high schools, including the county of San Diego, where there has been extremely little maintenance and almost no GMAX testing for hardness, which theoretically will reduce concussions. The entire concept behind synthetic turf is to replicate natural grass. The fact that the city here is having problems with their natural grass fields is because they were not properly installed. They're not being properly maintained. The city has had a proposal. It's been sitting with Nathan Mertz for almost 3 years to have 2 or 3 parks, to have somebody from Beyond Pesticides together with Chip Osborne Organics, who has 40 years of experience in managing organic playing fields, high-use organic fields. We have had this proposal before the city for almost 3 years, and Nathan has not budged. It's ridiculous. We have an organic IPM in this city. We cannot be putting pesticides and toxic chemicals in our parks, and yet you want to put in plastic with all of these chemicals that are known to leach to air, soil, and water. You're also putting the city at high risk for violation of the NPDES, which is the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, and their MS4 permits, which is stormwater permits. I just heard from the mayor that in fact Oceanside High School's field recently flooded. These fields are considered impermeable by both the US EPA and the California EPA. For every 1 inch of rain for 1 acre, and a regulation size field, is about 80,000 square feet, which is about 1.81 acres. For every 1 inch of rain, 27,000 gallons of toxic runoff from these fields. Okay? You are putting the city at high risk for violation of the Clean Water Act under NPDES. And last time I looked, that was a violation of about $10,000 a day. So it makes absolutely no sense to even be considering plastic grass carpets, given the current regulatory, legislative, and legal atmosphere, and not be able to replace them down the road. We also know that they are not recyclable. The baloney that's going on currently with claims of PFAS-free is frankly, excuse me, or shit. We know the games the industry is playing. The CEO and president of the Synthetic Turf Council sent a letter to Senator Ben Allen last June 21st, stating that yes, indeed, there is PFAS in the product. We know it. I have a running list of 32 different PFAS chemicals that have been found to date that I have pulled from public record. It's being used by DTSC. It's being used by the health branch of Cali, PA, OEHA. Nobody's being fooled here with this. And I hope that nobody else is being fooled. The claims of eco-friendly synthetic turf, again, is hogwash. I don't care if you put soybean oil in it, if you put sugarcane bagasse in it, it is still covered in plastic. The only eco that should be used in terms of synthetic plastic grass carpets is ecocidal, because they get so hot. And I've measured fields here in this community at 170 degrees, okay? 170 degrees. I've measured them hotter elsewhere, including in Rainbow, including down at Forest Ranch and other locations. They're ecocidal. They bake everything. They kill all living organisms. They impact biodiversity. We are working on an international plastics treaty, for God's sakes. So let's get real.
I appreciate the topic. Let's stick to what we're
Let's
doing.
get real.
Thank you.
God bless you. Mayor right there. Terry Johnson, you got the. Yeah, I'll tell you one thing. People get, there you go. One tall man. Yeah, you need to take your hats off. When you come like you put the military, you just take your hat off. Everybody, well, them, whatever. You put to take your hat off. Respect. My dad was a military. Just don't come in with your hat like you don't. Yeah, okay, you don't. What she just said, I listened to her, but you know, you have to respect yourself. But if you don't, you're gonna respect yourself, you'll wreck yourself. You know, you got to take that military. Like I see this man right here, young man. And I see these guys over here, young man. Yeah, people can laugh. They come to me. I got power because I got the power with the Lord Jesus Christ. Anyway, you got to respect that man, Terry Johnson. That man right there is a great man. He's right behind you. No, really, seriously. It's not because I've been in Oceanside for, I'm a legend. No, I know I'm a legend over here. People know that. Some people don't know me, but people know me, they know how I am. Don't ever get a person mad, because you get mad because they just get into the ego. The Lord is very good. That's all I have to really want to say. Because I'll tell you one thing, things are going to go right sooner or later. I know that for sure that. Well, God bless you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure what that was about, but okay.
He's tall. Good evening, Arlene Hammerschmidt. It is so good to see so many familiar faces here from the workshops. And it's really good to see people like following through, because I know this is a long, tedious process. It gets tiring. And it's really important. It's really important. It's important that the mission statement be lived up to. It's important that the values that the representatives at the workshops who really represented a cross-section of Oceanside determined and voted upon that those be implemented. And I'm not going to flash any work. And also, it was really wonderful working with you all at those workshops. I have like three parts here. One is, I know that you want the department to be you want this decision to be inclusive of all Oceanside and have input from everybody, especially those who it will affect and effect the most. So my number one question is what's the process to include the voices who are not here beyond turning in a survey?
So we've created a website that has all of the meetings, all of the topics. As I mentioned, I'm happy to meet with anyone. But the reality is that you know, we're building this document for the groups that are expressing an interest to participate in sports and
Right.
activities in Oceanside. So that's who, you know, anybody's welcome to participate, but that's the intent, is to accommodate our existing groups and build a system that is equitable to everybody.
So if somebody's interested and they're not here tonight and somehow Parks and Recreation Department does not have their correct email, how can they be included?
So like I said, the meetings are all recorded, so they can go through and see what the discussion was about. They can read about the topics that were covered, and then they can give the feedback that we're asking of people that are here. Everybody should have gotten an email from me with an attachment from the first meeting, the first survey, so that if you weren't here, you could submit it. Yeah.
Okay. I just want to know the process. You know
Sure.
me, I like to know the process. Okay. I forget what the first question was, but my answer is, there was a recommendation, it's like what was the first question? Oh, existing facilities. Somewhere in the Parks and Recreation Master Plan of, I think, 2019, there's a recommendation that fields be allocated to like, for instance, if I had a volleyball club team and the majority of my students, past life, my players lived near Melba Bishop, then the recommendation would be that that group be assigned the Melba Bishop gym for access. Or if the majority of my players lived in South Oceanside and District 3, and the only gym available was the Junior Seau gym, that would be the closest to their residential location. So that would be a criteria for deciding who goes where, including fields, not just buildings, but fields. I think your question was, with limited fields and opportunities and temporary and all that issue, there was a very, very strong theme from the workshops, Oceanside residents first. So, and I think in other cities also that I researched, that comes from the fact that we pay taxes to at least partially support these fields and facilities. And for those taxes, those rights of first use should go to residents. My 2 cents worth. Okay, so regarding new facilities, who gets these facilities or fields? Again, I said those who live closest, that could be a criteria. I'm trying to look for, whatever. And also with if there was a joint use agreement and then it went away, how do you, again, use the same criteria? I'm not one for, I know a lot of people have been here a long time and longevity should count and, you know, it feels like it's your space and your place and you put a lot of sweat equity into it. I agree about that. And at the same time, there are a lot of groups that don't fit in with anything that's existing already. And how do they get into the pipeline? If those with longevity are always there and have the first right of first refusal. You know, it's been hard. Thunder Rugby, I'm sure will testify, it's been really hard.
Yep. Yeah.
So, I think one of you guys mentioned a lottery. If there are groups with equal criteria, I would put them in a fishbowl. And if it's a facility that's, put them in fish bowls like by neighborhoods and say, okay, these guys were going for a new softball field team and these guys have first choice. Because that's fair to everybody who's new. It's a great idea. Okay, I'm sure there's other parts. So the new, make sure, and this was a recommendation from the third-party consultants report. Make sure that the criteria in the classification guide are clear. And I know you're, and easy to decide, that it's not subjective. You can look at it and check off the boxes and decide where a group goes. Clear. Hard cut, yeah. No subjective, yeah. It's also, everybody knows what everybody else is doing. And then, this happens to me when I'm dehydrated, I'm sorry, like shuts my brain off. So make sure the criteria are, oh, and be sure to include all the voices, those who are here. And I will personally start recruiting people who have talked to me and tell them, you know, go here, get this, and like mail it to you if they have to for input, to write an email for input if they have to, because they can't be, everybody can't be here. I get that. I feel like I'm forgetting something and I apologize. Oh, that's what it was. Everybody's familiar with these two pieces of CRAP. When I first laid my eyes on this, to me, it looked like a group of people sat down and wrote something that would protect their territory without any values and without a mission statement. And I said that to the city manager, which is why when I had the opportunity to help with that workshop, that's what we addressed first, was values. And we set a mission statement. This was its predecessor, and frankly, this is even worse, but I think is kind of still being used in a closet form. So, and I offer myself and my time to help wherever I can, to sit down with adults and offer my, you know, my attempted impartial 2 cents worth. And for those of you who don't know, I taught at Oceanside High School for the last 17 years of my career. I coached varsity girls and boys volleyball, started the boys volleyball team. Wow. And previous to that, I feel like I made a lot of sacrifices at Paris Union High School, starting sport groups in the 70s, girls and boys. I've been an athletic director. I've been a presenter at state conferences. I've been a workshop facilitator for 150 people in the room. I And so I offer my expertise for the better and my experience for the better of Oceanside, for the best of everybody in Oceanside. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Marissa, oh, anybody else?
I'm Janet Malauulu and longtime resident of Oceanside. Some of you look familiar to me, but I apologize for not knowing your names. Listening to what she had to say, I wasn't going to say anything, but listening to what she had to say about outside people who aren't here to be able to voice what they want to say or be part of this this conversation. There are some organizations that are currently functioning right now representing Oceanside that have given up because fields have been allocated for specific sports and programs and they can't get in. It's just so hard. And they keep getting rejected. So they've gone to other cities. And I'm specifically talking about the Oceanside Chiefs rugby team. I know that there are probably others, but they have tried and have been rejected in finding fields that they can use. And I know that we try to focus more on the youth, but there's more than just youth in our community. Lots of other people that raise the youth. And they represent Oceanside, but when they have home games, they have to go to Carlsbad because Carlsbad is a little more generous for them. And it was easier for them to get in. And they use Camp Pendleton for their practices, which they have to weasel to get in on Camp Pendleton because of the restrictions. And those restrictions are becoming harder and harder. And so some of their players are not able to get on Camp Pendleton to practice. And so it's becoming problematic. And they want a space too. And they would like to do it, but they've kind of given up because it's become such a hard process. And because in the past, there's been too many other organizations that have kind of dominated. And I get it that the youth come first, but we have to remember that there are other people in the community that play sports, that need the fields, that need the recreation. And so we need to be equitable to adults too. So I just wanted to share that to let you guys know that so you're mindful, not only like putting in for that. I talked with some of the members of the Chiefs today because they have practice right now as we're speaking. And I was like, well, do you want me to say something if it comes up or whatever? And they're like, yeah, go ahead. That would be great. They would love it because they represent Oceanside and they're actually in the playoffs right now for the state. And they play this Saturday at Carlsbad. And yet every time they play, everybody comes to Carlsbad representing Oceanside. Doesn't make sense. Why this team that does so successful every year and goes on to like championships out of state representing Oceanside, but has to play in Carlsbad.
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't make sense.
Right.
So anyway, that's all I wanted.
Anybody else? Okay, so we're gonna finish at 7:30. We've got 30 minutes left. I apologize. Can we go back to the PowerPoint, please? Okay, so I made a copy of the standing committees, the draft user classification guide that was presented at the standing committee. And I wanted to start by saying that there's some really good work that was done in preparing the draft. A lot of good research was conducted in terms of how other agencies allocate fields. And I think one of the most difficult issues that they faced in preparing the draft was dividing organizations that have factions that fit into different elements and don't fit neatly into a classification. For example, how do you classify an organization that has a recreational program as well as an elite program? So one of the ways that we discussed addressing this in our first meeting is by charging different fees based on their use. For example, a club that is scheduled at a park with a recreation and travel teams would be allocated together, but would pay different fees for each program. And this is one way that we could address some of the prioritization of charter schools, for example. The standing committee took the position that residency would be set at 70%. And we're still collecting feedback on that issue. As I mentioned before, the process is that we talk about it and then we collect feedback. What I really want to make sure is that as we decide what defines residency, that we're really prepared to live with that number and to verify that residency rate, regardless of what that number is. So as Arlene mentioned, one of the reasons that agencies have resident, non-resident rates and prioritization is precisely to take care of our residents. And as we discussed in the first meeting, one of the issues that we run into is when you have an elite team, sometimes you draw from neighboring cities. And we also run into the issue, for example, with Little League, where boundaries are set by the guiding national parent organization and organizations that are here in Oceanside, or organizations are split between two different cities, and how we balance that. So I also want to talk a little bit about prioritization of nonprofit organizations. And the first thing I want to say is that if we use nonprofit status as a determination, one of the things that we need to do is what I want to express is that we're going to have an intent to verify the status of that nonprofit organization. And the presentation that we had from Nikhil and the Kaizen organization in our first meeting, one of the things that they can do is scrub the IRS website for status of nonprofit, because there are a lot of nonprofit groups that get that status and then do not maintain it. And so one of the things that a lot of agencies do is rely on the letter of determination to verify nonprofit status. And that letter of determination, if you're an older organization, might be from the 70s or 80s and doesn't really reflect whether you're a nonprofit in good standing. So want to mention that about nonprofits. The other thing I want to mention as we consider making nonprofit as a determinant is that you can be a nonprofit organization and not be affordable. There are a lot of club teams that are nonprofits that are charging $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a season to play in their sport, and that's not really affordable. But they're a nonprofit organization, so something to think about as we talk about nonprofits. Another determinant that the document that the standing committee put together was to define the issue of competitiveness in the program. So in other words, prioritizing teams that do not have tryouts and require that all children play. So another important differentiator is whether organizations that are part of a national governing body are given priority. And one question would be whether an organization that is well established, but not part of a national organization, has the ability to run something that is a quality program and is affordable and equitable. So would that preclude that organization from receiving that status? One of the ways that we prioritized fields in San Diego was to give leagues priority over teams. And that was a way to differentiate between a program that helped a lot of kids versus a program that probably was a travel program, an elite group that had very few kids. So that's another thing to think about. Another determinant that the document from the standing committee used was to differentiate between teams that have volunteer and paid coaches. And this is one area where having different fees in the same priority classification helps to address some of those issues. For example, if we can agree that it is a priority to find space for our schools, these groups have paid coaches, and the difference could simply be that they pay for a field where a group like an AYSO or a Pop Warner or Little League that have volunteer coaches do not. So something to think about as well. So go to the next slide, which has the rest of the user classifications. And just finish off by saying the standing committee used a tier system that placed competitive teams below recreational programs. And the question that we need to discuss is, if we're going to go down this path, how do we allocate fields to organizations that have both? And so with that, if we can turn the PowerPoint off and open the floor for some discussion. I know that was a lot of information. So if we can go back, what are your thoughts on nonprofit status as a determinant? Something.
Matthew Berardini, as a long career as a CPA, I don't believe there's anything nonprofit about nonprofits. So I do think there needs to be some formalization while we're here to figure out the paid coaches versus non-paid coaches, paid government coaches for school versus non-paid coaches, and maybe do some tier or point system, not to complicate it, but I do think these issues need to be dealt with.
And I'm glad you mentioned the point system. One of the documents that is on the website for this process is the County of San Diego's allocation, and they use a point system for allocation of fields. So that is definitely an option. Other thoughts about nonprofits? Okay, how about the issue of competitiveness? So teams that cut players versus teams that take everybody.
As a nonprofit, it is, I also coach JV high school softball. And I've gotten girls to come try out as a ninth grader for the first time playing softball. And the question I asked them is why did you all of a sudden want to try out for softball and you've never played before your entire, youth era? And the response I get is the parents did not have the money to facilitate the monthly fees that go into travel ball or organizations like that. As a league president for Oceanside American Little League, it broke my heart to hear stuff like that, to where we now just reach out to say, hey, there's other means to play rec ball and have you get sponsored into it, work your way back into those fees, into working a snack bar, working out on the fields, that Little League is not allowed to turn away any individual family because of financial means. We are obligated to bring them and give them a hat and a jersey at the bare minimum, no matter whether they have the money paid for or not. We just have to figure out the rest. So I'll always lean towards putting a hat or a jersey on any kid over someone that's gaining profit from it.
So I think one of the ways to measure is whether a coach is paid or unpaid. Another way is to look at what the organization charges their participants to play. And so these are things that we thought about when I was in a different organization. We're looking at fees and allocation guideline revisions, and so it becomes difficult to compare apples to apples sometimes. I was talking to Reese with Pop Warner several months ago and asked what does it cost to play Pop Warner these days, And I was shocked, but at the same time, when you factor what it costs to pay for insurance, what it costs to pay for equipment, what it costs to pay for uniforms, what it costs to pay for lights, all these things. And even though the organization is a non, is a not category C and not paying rental fee for the fields and has volunteer coaches, it's still, I think she said over $500 to play Pop Warner football. Don't quote me on that price, but it's a ton of money. And I think you all kind of see it in your different organizations, and you know what goes into kind of your fee to make your program sustainable. So, you know, just a thought about what the kid pays being a determinant in terms of categorization and fees that they pay the city.
You understand that a nonprofit has to register as a nonprofit. Nonprofit doesn't mean that folks are unpaid. I absolutely support what you're saying.
I know exactly how a nonprofit status works. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Little League makes us register with the state of California and verify everything with that. And that is something that is done every year without failure. If we don't, we'll get letters from the IRS stating that we will lose our nonprofit status if we don't, abide by their rules and stuff. And we have to pay some fee every year just to keep adding on to that.
Right. And there's actually two parallel processes. One is through the state, but really the nonprofit status is out of the federal government through the IRS. And the issue that I address is that sometimes you're doing it every year. There are organizations that don't do it every year, don't file their taxes. And so then they revoke their nonprofit status. But I still have that letter of determination that says that I'm a nonprofit. So unless someone goes to the IRS website with their EIN or the exact name of the organization to verify that they're in good standing, a lot of organizations will treat them like a nonprofit. So when I say if nonprofit is gonna be how we determine it, I mean we're gonna determine it by nonprofit in good standing.
You
That's-
also have an administrative burden to do this that you're taking on as the city. And is that going to be another process for you that's built into this agreement we're coming to?
So the intent is to use technology to do it for us. So when we did the presentation, the first meeting, Kaizen, what they can do is create a mechanism for us to enter. You'll do it as the participant. When you fill in your permit, you'll enter your EIN, and that will, the system will scrub the IRS website and confirm that in fact you are a nonprofit in good standing. So it'll spit back, you're a nonprofit in good standing. Here's the rate that you're going to pay or your classification because you're a nonprofit. And then if you disagree, then you'll have to contact staff and we'll have to look into it. But the idea is to try and lessen the burden on staff, on Daniela and our sports team in terms of all of those little things that need to happen to make sure that the groups are who they are, who they say they are, and get what we want them to have if that's what the group wants. Any other thoughts on this? Okay, we've got 15 minutes, so I've got one more slide if we can go to that. Okay, so this is basically the list of things that I think we need to address in terms of for us to be able to draft a document. So we need to be able to identify where schools fit, whether you're a charter, a private, a parochial, or homeschool programs. That's a growing need. For senior groups, whether it's a social gathering, whether it's a no-fee program, whether it's a low-cost program, whether it's a for-profit program. For service clubs, whether it's open to the public or whether it's membership-based. For nonprofit organizations, are they in good standing? Is it an expired nonprofit? Are they in the application? Because if someone submits a letter to the IRS, it submits the process to start their nonprofit status, that can take several months. So how do we treat that group in the interim? For adult sports teams, are they socially gathering to play? Is it no-fee programs? Are they low-cost programs, or is it a for-profit program? For youth sports teams, is it no-fee teams? Is it low-cost teams? Is it a for-profit team? Is it recreation versus travel team? Is it leagues versus single team? Is it open enrollment versus tryout based? Is it paid or unpaid coaches? And what about the board members? For fundraising, is it a nonprofit? Is it for seniors? Is it for youth programs? Is it outside the function of their normal use? For health-based programs, is it youth? Is it seniors? Is it adults? Is it a program that has no fee? Is it a low-cost program, or is it a for-profit program? Is it a CrossFit program, or is it a personal trainer using our site? For clinical and instructional, is it a no-fee program? Is it low cost? Is it for-profit? For family and social gatherings, is it resident versus non-resident? What about commercial activity? Is it a for-profit group? Is it a nonprofit group that's doing fundraising? Is it a program with additional fees? Is it a filming? So these are all things that we encounter that we need to think about and how it fits into not just the user classification, because that is part of it, but we need a bigger document, the facility rental packet that guides staff on how we treat everyone that comes to the city of Oceanside, so that we don't get to the point where people are giving up and going to other cities. So with that, I'll open the floor to any comments about this information, about anything more in general, and then we'll take some comments from the audience. And I do want to get everybody out in the next 10 minutes.
Glenn Henton again, Coastal Academy. On the schools, the top of the list there that you just presented, I would recommend adding a kind of a resident school or non-resident school, because I know there are several schools outside of the city of Oceanside that do use the facilities. And I think those that have a hard address within the city should, have some type of priority. A second question or second comment. So with this, is this the starting point of where we're going to go to help, provide input and to ultimately develop the user classification guide?
It can be, or we can start from something new. There are elements to that, I think, that we discovered were problematic. I think the standing committee members would acknowledge that. And so there's opportunity. We can move things around from that document. But I think the biggest piece in my mind, and the feedback that I'm catching some agreement with in the group that could make it a more simple division, is the issue of fees versus no fees. And if we can agree that the prioritization of youth is treated in a similar way, but that youth program is treated differently in terms of how we charge them, not how we prioritize them, then I think that it might be easier to get to a point where we feel like we have a document that works for everybody and achieves equity. But long response to your question, I think that's to the group to determine. Like I said, a lot of a lot of research went into putting that document together. There are some things that certainly, from what I've heard in the 3 previous meetings, there would be agreement to. So it could be fixed into something different, or we could go back to the drawing board.
Is your staff going to take this and then come up with a draft proposal that's presented, or are we?
We're doing that. Yeah, the intent is to get feedback from you. What we will draft together, or what staff will draft, is based on the feedback that we get from you, the feedback that we collect from organizations that weren't able to attend. And then the intent is to take it to the standing committee, present it after it's been accessible. We're going to post it on the website. So the amount of time between the next meeting and the standing committee meeting is a little bit over a month. And so the intent is for people to be able to digest what we post as a draft, and then be able to come and say, we like this, we don't like that. And then we'll make the adjustments that we need to make before taking it to the full commission. And then we'll make adjustments as adjustments are required before we take it to city council. The intent, my hope is that we have a process that is sufficiently inclusive such that when we get to the point where we're at city council, that everybody has had a voice and we've addressed that voice in the document that comes forward. So we're not surprising anyone, and everybody at least has had an opportunity to say their piece. That's kind of the intent of the process.
And one last question, what's the timeline, rough timeline for trying to get to the standing committee, Parks Commission, City Council?
So the intent is June 11th to the standing committee, and then July 14th, second Tuesday in July to the Parks and Recreation Commission, and then potentially one of the meetings in August, probably the second one to City Council. That's the rough outline. But what I don't want to do is get so tied to that outline that we lose something in an opportunity to get a document that is correct. I want a document that we can all say, we worked on this, we're happy with what's going forward. And to respond to Wayne's earlier concern, if I need to get together with other folks, the beauty of this process is this is not an agendized public meeting that has to follow the Brown Act. This is the Parks and Recreation Department getting together with members of the community to go through a process. So if I need to sit down with others and bring them up to speed, we can do that. Anybody else want to speak in the last 5 minutes? Because the document that you put up there, I can, yeah.
The document you put up there listed like the users, right? Of all the parks. And it pretty much listed like every kind of specific entity currently possibly be in our community, including like health organizations and whatever. So, so if that's the case, you just said here that this group is going to be creating this use agreement. So is this use agreement specific for sport? Because isn't that what's represented here? It's the different sporting events that use the park and recreation in our community.
Right. So the question is the document that we're producing more comprehensive than just sports? And it is. The facility rental packet is what we use to allocate our facilities. So if someone wants to have a birthday party at the El Corazon Event Center, the facility rental packet informs staff on how to allocate that site. And so the reason that this is the primary audience working on this document is that this is the primary audience that has multiple use of any facility. For the most part, our facilities are used in one-off situations. So a family might come in and rent a facility for a day once a year or something along those lines. So we don't have a lot of groups that use our facilities on an ongoing basis. So the audience that really is impacted by allocation and the issue of equity is this one primarily. What impacts other groups is the issue of fees, and we're not discussing fees in this atmosphere. Those fees are set by council, and we go through a process to address that. So that's why this is the group participating, and I apologize, I'm talking to you with my face back, but I want to make sure that the audience at home hears that. So that's why you guys are involved in this process. But that is a big document with a lot of use for our department.
Okay, what kind of control do we have on, or you have on El Corazon?
On when you say El
On the
Corazon.
fields there?
So we have two city fields that the city allocates. So we've started to permit those fields. We work with SoCal, and we work around the schedule that they have for their tournaments. But we're really excited that Pop Warner was the first group that was able to use El Corazon, and I believe Coastal has used it, and Thunder Rugby used it. So we're
Yeah,
really proud of
for
being able to.
for about a month, and then it
Yep.
was cut off. You know that, right?
My understanding is that's what the request was. The request that was given for use of El Corazon was for the period that you got. That's my understanding. But if there's a need for, my understanding is that was a bridge. You wanted to go to MLK. Yeah, please.
So for the past 2 seasons, Thunder Rugby has been at Lake Park on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Right.
But we started a kickball league through the city of Oceanside, and unfortunately, it displaced them on Thursdays. So I gave them the option of being at Tuesdays at Lake and Thursdays at MLK, but they just wanted to be at one park, obviously, because that just makes it more convenient for everybody.
Right.
So MLK wasn't available in March. Yeah, it was March Sorry, I get all my dates confused. MLK wasn't available in March anymore. The only location that was the SoCal soccer fields. So they have the permit in March. And now they are back at Lake. And so it was just a whole complication, but I talked to Veronica.
Right.
We communicate really well together. And that's just the agreement that we had.
Okay.
So I guess what I want to stress in that comment is our staff works really hard to try and find a space for groups and make it a two-way conversation about the group's needs and what we have available. So in that case, I think Thunder Rugby was given a variety of different options and selected the option that worked best for your organization.
Yeah, because we started, we really started in Carlsbad for 14 years. But then since then we've expanded and we're the whole area, and we're a tier 1. We're 70% of our kids are Oceanside now. So, we want the, I live at the college in 76 area, and a lot of our kids are out there. And so Buchanan Park is would be a possibility if we could do that. Or we're doing Lake Park now. We've been at MLK. It was great at Southern California Sports Complex or the Corazon, but we need more, Oceanside fields because that's where our kids are. So.
Well, and the exciting thing for me is as we get closer to that joint use, and we're planning to start to, I'm assuming that that city council will ratify and that the school board will as well, that we'll have 5 additional fields that we'll be able to start to permit to groups by our fee structure, not the Facilitron and school district fee structure. So those fields will go back to, we'll take a step back to what Oceanside used to be, which was taking, making those school sites accessible for community sports programming. So very excited about that. So the joint use agreement will come to city council on May 8th. If anybody would like to attend, it'll be a council item on May 8th, and it's going to the Oceanside Union School District in May. And then our intent is to make the fields available or to start using their facilities in June. Yeah, the agreement that is in place right now expired in 2019, and the issue is that we have access to district fields for our use. So if we wanted to have a city program, we could have their fields for that use. But in order for you to use it, as third-party organizations, you would have to go through the school district and pay their fees. And unfortunately, the school district fees are pretty expensive. So it's been, my understanding is cost prohibitive for a lot of organizations to use those sites. So I'm very excited that we're taking a step backwards or a step forwards, if you want to think of it that way. And we've identified these 5 schools that we're now going to be able to make accessible to all of you. And I think we're headed in the right direction in terms of that relationship. But I can't tell you what happened between 2004 and 2019, which would have been the last iteration of that. Well, no, 2016 is when that joint use agreement was signed. Yeah. No, so the same fees that we charge for our fields is what we'll charge for the groups that are coming in and using those fields. So that's why this was so important for me to add these 5 fields, is to make them truly accessible to our groups. So, my recommendation for groups that are finding it difficult to use fields now is that we're accepting the requests for field allocation that starts, help me, Daniela, July 1st through December 31st, and the deadline is right. So it opened on April 1st, it closes on May 31st. So now is the time to make that request for that time period. So yes. No, those fields are not listed on the website, and the reason for that is that joint use is not yet ratified. So until city council approves it, and until the Oceanside Union School District approves it, we can't go through the process of permitting that. But May 8th, hopefully we'll have a positive decision from city council, and then we'll move forward with that. May 8th is the city council.
Manny, can you?
Yeah. So we had a joint use. The question is, are we negotiating with any other school districts? And we had a joint use agreement with the Vista Unified School District because we actually do have a lot of crossover between the two cities that joint use agreement expired. And our intent is to initiate those conversations one step at a time. We're a small department, and so we'll get there. But yes, that is definitely something that we'll continue to look towards because there is an opportunity. There are schools in Vista that I think we could definitely take advantage of their space to help alleviate some of the stress in Oceanside.
Manny, two parts. One, what types of fields are going to be used at these schools? And the second part is who's maintaining these fields after the city permits them to be used by someone else?
Yeah, so they are the multi-purpose fields, and they are going to be maintained by the school district. Okay, so I'm happy if you don't have my contact information, I'm happy to sit down with anybody. I drive an hour each way home. Happy to have conversations over the phone and be productive during that hour. So definitely I'm accessible, but I want to be respectful of everybody's time. And I said 2 hours, we're at a little bit over, but thank you for coming, and have a great evening. Oh, go ahead.
Faked you out. I was over there and he knew that I wanted to say one thing and then I moved over here to get closer to save time. Anyway, when Mr. Gonzalez said, what about board members? And about who gets paid in a nonprofit organization? What he's referring to is there's a nonprofit in which board members do get paid. Everybody gets paid. And I'm very happy to see that you have analyzed so closely the draft user guide for presentation. So that's it. No, overtime. Thank you.
So the question is about Measure X funding, and I think the allocation for what is left of Measure X has happened, but Measure X will have to be renewed, and there's an opportunity for the community to weigh in, and if the purpose of Measure X funding remains consistent with what it is now, absolutely there's an opportunity to help subsidize. There's an element to Measure X about youth engagement and keeping kids safe, and athletics meets that criteria. So it's just a question of going through that process. Okay, have a good night.